Welcome to Doom 2. So many of you had asked for a commentary on Doom 2, and I think I was initially a little bit reluctant, just because I'm a bit iffier on Doom 2 compared to Doom 1 in like a lot of different ways, honestly. I mean, Doom 2 is a pretty weird game. There's very little in the way of any changes to the engine or core gameplay. It's all low-level stuff, basically, and there are like a bunch of new enemies and some new textures and one new weapon, which we will encounter shortly. Here, this is the demo. I'm just showing you that it's the demo. This level, Circle of Death, won't be in this video, but probably the next one. But yeah, Doom 2 was made also at a time when Doom hype was starting to be a big thing, and the sort of like, I'm messing around with the display there, and the sort of like rock star stature of id Software, and just nerd culture in general, computer games, video games, was becoming more mainstream. Doom, I don't know, I guess Doom was comparable to like, not quite on the scale, but comparable to like, you know, something like Minecraft or League of Legends would be today. And John Romero in particular was a big celebrity. He played, you know, multiplayer a lot with a lot of different folks. He corresponded with a lot of different fans. He would go to events and make public appearances and, you know, drive around his fancy cars and stuff. And I read in the book Masters of Doom that John Carmack was a little bit concerned about that because he felt that the quality of Doom 2 suffered a little bit. So Doom 2 was made in like 9 months. It was released in September 1995, so about 9 months after Doom 1. And really it's much more just level design focused. Here I'm gonna skip out of this second demo and just start the game for you, because we're gonna see that level shortly. So this is called Entryway. It's by Sandy Peterson, who you saw much of in the first Doom 1 design video. And this entryway, I guess you could call it, this first room is very iconic. That like sort of angle on those steps, the like triangle steps, the lighting, those two guys standing there, the weird like blasted out texture, brown pipe texture, which I'm pretty sure is new to this game, and also the fact that you can go to the left and get that chainsaw, and it's a point of no return, so you have to think to do that like right away. It's a neat little secret. I don't think it counts as a secret actually, officially, but makes this level more fun. But outside of this first room, which is, you know, definitely a very iconic room, I don't necessarily think this level, as compared to like the first level of Doom 1, which has these nice big grand open spaces, this level feels sort of comparably cramped. It doesn't like cohere as well. It doesn't feel as polished, and I think this like green hallway is really the reason why. It just like you go from this very, you know, very memorable opening room into this green hallway that's just very indistinct. This is a new texture in Doom, but then this room also feels very incomplete. Like John Romero's whole thing was that he would make the first level last after like all the lessons and stuff were learned from the design of the rest of the game, but I feel like this was just designed randomly, especially this room. I don't know what this room has to do with anything. I guess it does sort of hint at that we'll be doing city maps, and a lot of the city maps have these sorts of constructions. Maybe at the time this looked like more, you know, of a thing. The lack of detail wasn't as noticeable. I'm playing in Chocolate Doom, so you're seeing basically what the original game would look like in 1995. But thankfully that first room, it's short-lived sort of disappointment, because this room brings us back to Doom 1. You know, you got the view outside. This room is much more nicely shaped. It's nice and big. It's a nice little exit area for this map. And there's also a secret that you'll see in like about 2 seconds where I go outside. There's a little secret where you can jump onto one of those lights and get a rocket launcher, which I'm about to do. And it's also shows you that like Doom 2 is going to be a pretty brown game, much more so than Doom 1. I think that was one of my complaints with Doom 2 when I first played it. So a lot of people, probably more people, played the full commercial version of Doom 2 than Doom 1 because it was released in stores. And, you know, it was a big box PC game in stores, as opposed to Doom 2 was, as opposed to Doom 1, which was all mail order. You know, plenty of people probably played the shareware episode, but they'd have to do a mail order for, you know, send out to id or the publisher, GT Interactive, for a full copy of Doom 1. And that was the case until Ultimate Doom was released. When I was a kid, we bought Ultimate Doom, but I never owned Doom 2, so I didn't play it until like the early 2000s. And I played it in like a source port. Yeah, so this is the view outside. It's kind of, you know, showing you that this is still Doom. It's still reminiscent of the first episode of Doom 1. It's not, you know, a complete disappointment or whatever. It's still the first game, you know, but it's in a lot of ways, but it's also taking it in a different direction. Some would say that for better, but I think most people would say for the worse. I think not, and it's not like a slight against Doom 2. It just feels a lot less cohesive in general. But yeah, when I first played Doom 2, I played it on a source port, so I didn't actually play it in, you know, the original type of engine. Sorry about that. That I did, you know, that I'm playing it in now. And the experience is a bit different. Like, it's a bit darker, more cramped. It's a little bit scarier than, I had trouble with visibility and stuff. It's a little bit more unpredictable. And I think it made certain levels in this first 6 levels that I'm playing here come off better. So yeah, this is Under Halls. It's by American McGee. That view is another view that a lot of people are probably used to seeing, because a lot of like user Doom levels are, you know, they take up the first map of Doom 1, and therefore, you know, when you finish the map, you always end up back in Under Halls, and you always end up back with that view. And it's always funny, you know, if you play like a super hard map and then you come back and you're in Under Halls and you're just like looking at these zombie men facing away from you. But this is actually a pretty charming little map. So a few things about American McGee, since he's a new designer at id. He was hired in between Doom 1 and 2. He was apparently John Carmack's car mechanic, and he was only 21 at the time that he was hired, but like he really, really wanted to be a designer. And apparently he had this like really troubled childhood, which I guess, you know, made him relate to like Romero or whatever. And he was like at some point abandoned by his mom or something. I don't know. The part in the like a few sentences in Masters of Doom about it are pretty weird, but so it's hard to know exactly the context. But I guess he was really determined to sort of prove himself as a designer, and, you know, being worthy of being at id and these first maps, because these were his first maps as far as I know. And I think he does that, you know, other than these maps not reaching the highs of the John Romero maps, or even some of the Sandy maps, which are, you know, much more inconsistent than his maps, but there are, I'd say, higher highs. But just in general, his maps are just solid, and he does all of the next maps that I'm about to play, the first basically like mini episode of Doom 2, and it's remarkably consistent, and it also sort of builds in a cohesive and more coherent way. Unfortunately, this will not be followed by pretty much the rest of Doom 2. The rest of Doom 2, it's like just all over the place, but I like how he takes this. So a lot of the American McGee levels are pretty small, but they feel kind of dense in the way that, or more detailed in the way that like Doom 1 levels do. Actually, I think his levels remind me the most of Doom 1 of probably anything. Not because, I mean, there are some, he has some design tropes and decisions that don't really fit in with anything. And the amount of detail is probably higher. You can see all the little inlets on the wall and stuff. These are things that are often characterized as like details that new mappers will do, or PWAD fan mappers and stuff will do. And I think that kind of speaks to the fact that these are his first maps, and he's a very good mapper. He's very talented, but he's doing the thing that maybe some mappers are doing, where they're fussing over the details a little bit. Of course, this is nothing compared to other Doom maps, but I like that building. By the way, it kind of sets the tone that this is going to be a city setting. It's kind of a strange little turn into that, like, because this map is mostly just kind of these like tech tunnels, and this is not a particularly great, interesting, compelling setting, nor do I think a lot of his maps are a lot of just tunnels, but they work. And yeah, this area is it's very memorable, even though it's very small, and it will sort of introduce you to the fact that there will be more city maps with this kind of brick textures. You will be going more in and out of buildings. Unfortunately, I don't think they're always handled as well as it's handled right here, when there's just that one area that's very memorable, but we'll get to that when we get to that. The American McGee levels are also like really dark. I think he just has a dark sensibility in general, which, obviously anyone who's heard of American McGee's Alice or some of the work that he did afterwards, you can tell that. But I think that's what makes me think of Doom 1, the fact that it is mostly these sort of tech-basy type settings, the fact that it's dark. Of course, he's using new textures and stuff. And especially on these early maps, you can tell that they're really trying to make maps around some of these new textures to really show them off. So this room is a really interesting setup. There are these two holes in the floor on either side, and there's a bunch of enemies in them, and there's a bunch of exploding barrels, and diving into them is kind of suicide if you're not careful. It's real like touch and go. It's like, you don't really know if you're going to be alive if you dive in there. And I think that pit in particular is the reason why this map has never been beaten in what is referred to as Tyson mode, which is like beating the map just with your fist. That sounds bad, but anyway, that's never happened with Underhalls, but every other map has been beaten in Tyson mode. And I think that room is part of it, because it's real dangerous diving into there with the barrels. It's really, especially with how dark it is, you have no idea what you're doing. It's a really nice little dangerous setup for such a small map, and I think gives it a little bit more of a feeling of like Doom 2 is definitely more cruel with the encounters, and they're less incidental feeling than they are in much of Doom 1. Like a lot of Doom 1 feels like these giant sort of alien structures that oftentimes you're just wandering into and encountering enemies in, which, is fine with me. I like that a lot, actually. I prefer the design of Doom 1. But Doom 2 is much more set up towards the encounters and the combat. And I think that sensibility has been sort of the dominant sensibility that has ended up becoming, the trend of a lot of Doom PWADs, a lot of, Doom maps of the last 20, 25 almost years. That's for good and for bad. I mean, obviously the reason for that is because Doom 2 is sort of the template of of most WADs, and that's because of the new textures and the new enemies and stuff. It just is what people tend to use by default. And the super shotgun is, which I'm using here. You can see like the encounters here. They're almost designed for like a super shotgun because there's too many enemies for you to take down just with a normal shotgun. But bringing out the super shotgun, you really can just see, how it makes these kind of encounters much more easy to deal with. You take out a bunch of guys at once. So I think if you look at the design in terms of like the way that it ramps up, what weapons it expects you to use, like it seems very clear there that it expects you to use a super shotgun, which is another, like, I think these maps do a generally really good job of like teaching you and introducing you to different sort of enemies and encounters. Here we're introduced to the chain gunner, and chain gunners, anyone who has played a lot of Doom maps will tell you that chain gunners are scary, and they are never stop being scary, basically. If a chain gunner is like right in front of you, it's pretty easy to just shoot them, take care of them. They're very weak. But if there's a chain gunner at a distance, it's dark, maybe they're on a ledge, you can't exactly see where they are incredibly dangerous, and you will see me get owned by some chain gunners later in the next map. But yeah, this map, by the way, is called the Gauntlet or the Gantlet, depending on both are used, which is kind of weird. But this is sort of like this gauntlet or gantlet is sort of a junction. Like this room, I guess, is the junction that you cross. This is the sort of main room. But the architecture is nice here. The way that it has, there's sort of multiple entrances into different rooms. The way that it gives you a view into the outside, it makes it sort of feel more reminiscent of Doom 1, or at least, if not exactly Doom 1, it's familiar. It gives you that sort of more detailed setting. It feels like a place. And, like I said, unfortunately, this is not always followed very effectively in a lot of the other Doom maps. But this map, it's introducing you to a big confrontation setup. There hasn't been a big room like this exactly with this many enemies yet in the game. And, with the stairs and with these guys here, that's a little bit scary, especially when there's chain gunners. So really this room is the core of this map. But it is like, I don't know, it does a really good job of ramping up. And we'll get to it later, but this was one of my #1 complaints about Doom 2, is that these first several maps, they are a little light on content if you compare, like, one of the map that was voted the best Doom map by Doom World, Containment Area Episode 2, Map 2. It's the second map of the episode, and it's huge. So obviously the flow in Doom 2 is different. The levels sort of it has to get into it more gradually because, there's 30 consecutive maps instead of 3 episodes. Yeah, that's the other thing with this, with Doom 2, is 30 consecutive maps. So you have to play all of them, aside from the 2 secret maps. And so that means that it's going to bring you into them a little slower. But it does make up for it in terms of difficulty, even though there aren't really high-level enemies coming up yet. There's still some tricky situations. The last map you had all the stuff with the barrels. Here you have the chain gunners, and the open environments can be pretty tricky, even though it's a small map. Okay, the other thing that I would say is I think this map actually does a pretty good job of foreshadowing his later map, Map 14, which is called the Inmost Dens. It's very similar sorts of setup and layout and all that kind of stuff. So definitely, setting it up for that. Unfortunately, again, it's inconsistent because, you only see, after this first deluge or whatever you want to say of American McGee maps, you only see 2 more maps of his in the rest of Doom 2. So that's the issue with that, I guess. Yeah, so this teleporter sends you back sort of near the beginning area, and you can see in a view back there, which is nice. I always like that when that happens in maps. And this outdoor area is an interesting little setup. So all of the next exit areas of the next 3 maps will have their own sort of setup for these, like, you know, self-contained encounters with different enemies. This one revolves around a lot of pinkies. I'm using my chainsaw because it's fun to use the chainsaw. Of course, you can see that it's a little difficult when there's a lot of pinkies biting you at the same time. It's a lot easier when they're in like a straight line. And this is very simple, but it's a nice little pit. It also shows you that like these pinkies and specters are oftentimes, they put them in pits because they're really melee enemies. They can do the most damage there. You know, you have to run around them. So that's one of their primary uses in Doom in general. And I really don't know if they were thinking about if people had played through Doom 1 already or not. You know, a lot of people only played Doom 2. So it's kind of interesting for me to think about, you know, what your impression would be based on that. I do think because these opening maps are reminiscent of Doom 1 in some ways, if only just because they're kind of tight hallways and they're darker and sort of creepier, they kind of have a horror vibe. I think maybe that gives you enough of an impression of what the game is like that you don't really need Doom 1, but I don't really think it... I don't know, I'm not really sure how I would compare these American McGee maps to, you know, other maps by John Romero or Tom Hall or Sandy Peterson in Doom 1, because they are kind of shorter, even though they are very detailed and pretty interesting. So yeah, that was the Gantlet, or the Gauntlet. Here's the Focus. The Focus is kind of an interesting map. I don't know how I feel about the Focus. It feels like a more of a contemporary game in the April Agitation thread on Doom World, which is where they voted for their favorite Doom maps. Linguisa, who runs Doom World, in the description of this map said that it is sort of reminiscent of Doom 3. It's more this horror vibe. Of course, you have the lovely, like, Crusher, which is being treated as this, like, window pane that goes up and down, and that sound just plays through the rest of the map. It's kind of intimidating. It's a nice kind of creepy vibe, and I think it came off better to me. I like that you can see into the next area here in these, like, you know, like lattice fence, whatever you want to call it. And it's always just good. It's always good telegraphing whenever a game designer, there's a switch, you hit the switch, you can see exactly what the switch does, because Doom 1 and Doom 2 are generally pretty bad about letting you know what the switch that you've hit has done. It doesn't, there's no feedback unless the map designer frames it in that way. Here you can very clearly see that key is going down, so it tells you what your objective is, which is very nice. I think the amount of detail in this map with the lights, the lighting, the triangle lighting is used a lot in these American McGee maps. It's very distinctive and very consistent. Here you're going over to the other side, very easy, but there is that pit of mud, I don't know what you want to call it, and you can get stuck in it. And when I first played Doom 2, I didn't realize that you could get out of here, and so I got stuck in there and I died, and it's pretty scary, especially there's a specter in there. You know, it takes down your health pretty fast. You have to locate that secret pretty quickly, but it does count as a secret, so that's nice. And of course it connects back up like all good secrets. I think this is a map, I think I said this already, but I think this is a map that comes off better to me in Chocolate Doom than in a modern source port. And I think that's because the grainier sort of darkerness comes off better in this. Like, the horror vibe of that works really well with this map. I also think that the light switch here is a really nice touch. Again, you see those triangle lights, and you can see the red key right there, which is really nice. I couldn't figure out what that like little inlet was for, but again, this map is very clearly giving you what your motivation is. So even though the layouts, if you compare it to Romero, who's very intersecting layouts, he's much more advanced with the architecture. In spite of it having a fairly simple hallway sort of based architecture, the details and things make this interesting. Yeah, and there's that little corner box, which is, you know, definitely something very non-standard in Doom, just in general. Walking over a box to activate a thing. It's something that you could figure out pretty easily because that tiny box is just in that corner there, and like, what else is it for? It's actually pretty nice that that's done that. So the telegraphing of stuff is generally just really good in the American McGee maps, and it's also why he gets the reputation of being kind of like a PWAD, you know, like a mapper that seems like they make more modern maps, because of some of these touches are just not things that are necessarily consistently done in Doom 1 or 2. So they're not things that people associate with the design. They're not things that Romero or Sandy Petersen would do. So they feel kind of, you know, and they're like these one-off sort of detailed ideas. So they feel kind of almost out of place, but not in a bad way. And I actually think these levels these first 6 do a very good job of flowing into each other. You know, the last map was very open. This map is hallways and it's dark. The map before that was hallways and dark. You know, and the map before that had some outside areas. The next map, it's going to be some tunnels that are very dark, but then there's also going to be outdoor areas too. So it kind of contrasts them well. Yeah, and I'm sorry about the window thing there. Capturing Chocolate Doom is like, with the screen capture software I'm using, doesn't work completely. Like, I have to do like this select screen thing, so sometimes windows get overlaid and it's annoying. But anyway, I think I'm trying to figure out a secret here. I'm trying to get all the secrets, but you know, I'm probably not going to. It's just not something that I'm probably going to be able to do, just because it's a lot of time. But I do think the secrets can be part of like the texture of a map. Like here, the secret is how you get behind this crusher thing, which the sound, of course, keeps playing throughout the map, so it makes you think that, like, you know, monsters are going to be coming and repopulating that area. It gives it a really ominous vibe, which works well with the horror thing. Like, what has happened in this area? Why is it called the Focus? I have no fucking clue why it's called the Focus, actually. I have no idea what that actually means in the context of this map. But I think the problem that I have with this map is that it doesn't fit in with the rest of the game. Like, here we have these cramped, dark halls. It feels almost more like a contemporary sort of horror game, and then, you know, it isn't really echoed in the rest of the map. So I was saying about these encounters that are at the end of these 3 maps. I think this is the one that's the strongest, because again, you're activating this platform, you're crossing this gap, which you're doing in all 3 of the last rooms in map 3, 4, and 5. But here you got the specters, it's dark, you got the chain gunners, you have to dive into this pit. It's really pretty scary, actually. And it's the kind of multi-dimensionality at work. You know, it's funny, I'm thinking about this in the context of, like, I compared this to a modern horror game, but I can't think of a game that, like, the enemies are on multiple levels, and the horror here is that you're sort of on 2 different tiers, and there are people shooting at you from above. And honestly, like, I think a lot of horror games, like contemporary ones, don't even necessarily do this. They're oftentimes just about, like, what's in front of you. They don't have the height dimension that Doom really tries to take advantage of. And And that's another way that I would say Doom design is maybe more advanced than a lot of stuff that's come after, because of the way that the verticality and height and like interfacing with enemies at a different sort of height level from you is actually an often really important thing, especially when we get to the city maps. So yeah, here we're at the waste tunnels. This was the second demo that it was showing earlier. And right away, you know, we see the super shotgun. If you don't have the super shotgun by now, you know, you need it, so get it. And of course, since the ending of the previous map was kind of brutal, they're giving you the soul sphere, but it's not just going to give it to you right away. The funny thing about this trap, though, is that, like, you go, it's like you're in quicksand or something. You know, usually you expect a wall to open up and a bunch of monsters to come out. That's not what happens here. What happens is that if you go to the side of these areas, this lift just automatically throws you down into these enemies. And I think that's something that we've seen him do towards the end of map 2. You know, with the exploding barrels room in Underhalls. Here also you have to deal with, there's windows to this outside area, there's hit scanners shooting at you, you know, which are the zombie men and the chain gunners. And it's pretty scary, like, because there's, like I said, the action is coming at you from multiple levels, and that's, you know, not something that you might be expecting. Here, like, there's a lot of windows. It's reminiscent of map 3. It's like bringing us back to the fact that, you know, I was saying that there's kind of a contrast between the maps, like maps 2 and 4. It's sort of these like tech hallway maps that are dark, and then 3 and 5 are these brown maps that are in these like that have these outside areas with lots of like inlets in them, a lot of holes, a lot of different places for enemies to be coming in and out of and shooting you at. So that contrast is really nice. It's kind of mixing up the challenge, but it's moving you forward in a particular way. This is becoming more, there's more enemies coming from more different places. Here I think I'm looking up how to get the secrets. Like I was saying, the secrets can be a really important part of the texture of a map, or they can just feel like, okay, this is a room. So it really depends. I might not try to get all the secrets. I might just not be able to remember them, or it might be too much of a hassle to get them. And I don't think that they're necessarily, you know, a required part, but when they do add a lot to the map, it's always really nice. Yeah, also the use of like these lifts, like American McGee really seems to like that. A lot of lift use, which I don't know. Yeah, I think he's trying to get. You can see in these maps, like, because they're kind of square, they're kind of boxy a lot of the time. Not map 3 really wasn't, but this is like basically a rectangular shaped room. He's trying to do a lot of bits and pieces to make that more interesting. Because if you look at a John Romero map, there's almost never just a straight rectangle. Like, yeah, you can see on the auto map, this is a bunch of different rectangles. But yeah, the John Romero maps tend to never be like a straight rectangle. There's just too much going on in different places. The shapes feel a little bit more organic, just overall. But the fact that these are hallways, the fact that it's more rectangle-y, in the way that, you know, you might expect from a contemporary game. Maybe I'm throwing shade to some contemporary game design, like especially horror stuff that is very much hallway and set piece driven. But anyway, I think he tries to get around that by having all these little pieces and parts and details that give the map an identity, and these pits, these sending you down, is really a big part of it. Yeah, here I'm finally using my plasma rifle. Well, I shouldn't say finally, I just picked it up actually. That was a nice secret, by the way. The fact that a wall went down and then another wall went down and you had to see that and run to it before it went back up, that's a very clever secret. Here, these like little glowing arrows, that's something that you like never ever see in Doom. It's very weird, actually. It does give this map a distinctive identity, but then the problem with that is that it sets up an expectation that, oh, you know, maybe I'm going to see this kind of weird, slightly kind of disturbing horror vibe later in the game, and you're really not. Like, you're not going to. Like, there's going to be a lot of other cool stuff. There's a lot of variety. Doom 2 is very varied. There's a lot of different, like, I think it speaks to how people maybe play or think about maps in a more contemporary manner. Like, contemporary Doom was, people are much more kind of all over the place. You know, different maps are more self-contained. There's, you know, markedly different sensibilities in different maps. I think that has carried over very much to the Doom community, and is why Doom 2 probably has a bigger legacy. But it also is kind of frustrating feeling sometimes. It does make these maps easier when you're like, I just want to play, you know, X map or whatever. Oh, that map does a really cool thing. Then you can play that map, and you get a really good sense of that map by just warping to that map and playing this one. This first few levels, this first episode of Doom 2 really doesn't do that so much, but there are some things in these maps that kind of give you a setup that makes it, that are, you know, only really done in one map. But yeah, like, so far this has felt pretty consistent. Like, the environments are a bit different from each other, but this, like, tunnels with these water, you know, walkways, pathways, is very reminiscent of Underhalls. And even though it's brown this time, it's more presumably the setting, it's more rough. It's more like a cave that's been carved out. It's a little bit more mysterious and scary because you have those arrows. It's so dark. You kind of got sent into this pit. It's a disorienting area. It's actually really nicely done, I would say. And there are a lot of these chain gunners and, you know, other enemies. American McGee likes his hit scan enemies. I think I'll try and read actually a bit from the April Agitation thread where they voted on these maps by Linguisa. So he's talking about the dark underground passageway following the first area is notable as the first unavoidably pitch black area of the game. I don't know if it was intentional, but I think it's worth noting that instead of just dropping the player into inky darkness, McGee striped the floor and ceiling with what looked like, for all the world, like dotted street lines or movie theater aisle lights. Maybe kind of going with that city vibe. Like, these maps don't really feel like city maps per se, but the fact that there are these brick settings, the fact that there was that little self-contained building in map 2, I guess is sort of like, this map feels more like a city map, I guess you could say, but it's more like the internal part of the city map. But yeah, I think that was a nice touch. That area is really nice. Unfortunately, it isn't really, like, I don't really know if there's anything that I could even compare it to in the rest of Doom 2. So this is the last of these, like, self-contained exit areas where you're trying to get from one side of a pit to another. I think this is probably the least memorable one. It does fit with the map well. I just didn't remember this exit area at all. Like, I completely confused it with the exit area of another map that is much more memorable, which I'm sure we'll get to. I don't even remember what map it is it's in, because Doom 2 is all about, I feel like Doom 2 is all about the set pieces and the setup. Like, it's all about, like, diving into these like setups where you just don't know exactly what to expect. But, you know, there might be, you know, 2 or 3 encounters that are just kind of like, meh, like, whatever, I don't care. But then there'll be 1 or 2 that are really like, wow, that was crazy, that was memorable, you know. And I think that's what makes Doom 2, even though it's a weird game, it feels kind of, I wouldn't say rushed, but maybe, I guess I would say rushed. The thing is, like, Doom 1 was only made in a year, and Doom 2 was made in 9 months, and they were just making new maps, so it's not rushed compared to, like, other games that id Software was making at the time. But I guess given the fact that, like, John Romero was out partying or whatever. Like, his maps are still very good, but the fact that there aren't that many of them maybe reflects on the quality. Like, unfortunately, I think if he were able to do more maps, this might be more consistent. Of course, American McGee is like pretty determined to prove himself as a designer, and I think does a really good job in these maps, but he's kind of speaking to an episode or a game that didn't end up really coming together in the same way that you might think that it's going to. Yeah, Doom 2 is just, it's a fascinating artifact more than anything else. I would say that Doom 1 is, especially the first episode, really, but like even the second episode and even the third episode in places is just more consistent than Doom 2. You just never know what you're going to get with this game. And when you're playing everything consecutively, where you have to go from one map to the other, you would expect it to be more narratively focused, more set up in a way that like it's a gradual journey, whereas episodes you might expect it to be a more all over the place, but instead it's kind of the opposite. The episodes in Doom 1 are more feel like a journey or whatever, whereas this one long episode in Doom 2 just feels like, okay, we're just gonna do whatever. Yeah, it's cool, and that's fine. But it's not, I don't know, it's not what drew me into Doom. It's not what drew me into the first Doom. It's still good, though. I mean, it's still interesting. This is the Crusher. This is probably one of my favorite maps in Doom 2, and this is also what ends this episode and also ends the hope that Doom 2 is going to be in any way cohesive. This map is, I guess you could call it, a gimmick map, but it does the gimmick in a way where it feels like it's been building to it. It's both unexpected and it feels like it kind of makes sense. Like, it feels like you've gotten to the point where you expect something weird or crazy to happen, but you don't know exactly what's going to happen, and boy, is it unexpected. I love this beginning area. It's this kind of like dark maze. It's reminiscent of like episode 3, map 2, except it's indoor. It's all this brutalist brick stuff or brutalist metal stuff that American McGee loves and that John Romero will use quite a bit. The lighting has that sort of shaped pattern. A lot of use of those lamps. American McGee seems to like those lamps and placing them like inside of walls so that he can do the lighting effects. But yeah, you can see this little cage over there. That's what I'm about to head to. And you can probably hear the sounds of, if you finish Doom 1, you can hear the sounds of that spider demon, that Spider Mastermind, and you're like, what the hell? But this map is also called the Crusher, so maybe the Crusher will be something, presumably you're thinking it's going to crush you, but maybe it'll be something that'll crush the Spider Mastermind, who knows? I'm looking for a secret right now, I'll find it later, but yeah, you can at least see this opening area. It's pretty disorienting. It's only really shaped like a square or like a rectangle, but it doesn't look like that. It looks much more kind of confusing. It's a nice first area. It has its own identity. I'd say almost every area of this map has its own kind of identity, which is what is really nice about it to me. And immediately you go from this room. I think this is what makes me think of Doom 1 too, because Doom 1 there'll be a room with its own identity and then like another area that has its own identity, and it kind of is like one after another. It just feels like the experience has been honed down a little bit more. But yeah, here we're finally facing the Spider Mastermind, and this is the first time I die, because if you don't know what you're doing, then yeah, you're going to get killed. And you're not going to have the ammunition to fight it, but thankfully you can see right when I died, and first-time players will also see this, that the Crusher activated, and that's what you're going to have to use to kill the Spider Mastermind. And also, thankfully, there's this little inlet in the corner, so you have to run past the Spider Mastermind. You're probably going to get hit, but if you can get in this little inlet and wait for the Spider Mastermind to be crushed, then, the Spider Mastermind will be dead, and you can pick up that nice plasma gun. I think in lower difficulties, I don't think the Spider Mastermind is used in lower difficulties, but I really think it's an important part of this level, because it's like a boss. Like, the Spider Mastermind was the end boss of Doom 1 and is now being used in level 6. Like, we're not even a third of the way through Doom 2. And these maps have been pretty short, and all of a sudden we're already dealing with the Spider Mastermind here. But then the Spider Mastermind is just being crushed. Like, it tells you to expect the unexpected, basically. It's really kind of funny. It's like it's kind of a funny joke, and it's something that Romero will also mess with later on. But I like the way that it's done here, because a lot of people don't remember or don't think about the rest of the map, but I find the rest of the map to be pretty well designed and interesting too, in addition to this. Like, already we see the Crusher, and that should be like the climactic moment, whatever, but not really exactly. I mean, in some ways yes, but like it also keeps moving you forward in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So I'll read from the April Agitation thread, by the way. I like these columns are really nice. This texture really works well for them, and also the fact that like you can see that you have to run over this column in front of me here, because it's like shorter than the rest of them. But in order to do that, you have to do it quick enough before the lift goes down. And if you haven't dealt with the Spider Mastermind yet, then you get fired at by him. So it's pretty scary. And then, of course, there are these Imson cages, which, aren't going to be a huge liability, but you still have these fireballs flying at you. And you can see my health is not good right now. Thankfully, like, these maps are really good in terms of health, because I felt like the moment that I started getting down in health in pretty much all of them, like, was the moment that I got a big health boost. So that was really nice. You can like really tell that they actually put work into balancing these maps, which is, not always the case. I don't know if it's the case with some of the Sandy Petersen maps, because a lot of the Sandy Petersen maps, it really depends on where you go in the map, but we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, I guess the one disappointment for me when I played these first 6 maps was just how brown they were. But with all the lighting, the horror vibe, the self-contained nature, and the fact that it got weird here, it feels like a good sequel to Doom 1, because, it's like no gods, no masters. It's killing it's killing the boss that you killed in Doom 1. It's already saying like, okay, fuck this, It's already being slightly tongue-in-cheek, and kind of recontextualizing the game into something else. But at the same time, this map feels kind of dark and serious and scary. So even though it's funny, it's not done in this like overly comical way, I guess. It more comes off kind of weird and disorienting and scary. I think American McGee is good at doing that. I think Tom Hall and Sandy Petersen are the more like unpredictable designers, and John Romero's the more sort of balanced one. I think American McGee is really in between, in that like his maps are more self-contained, but they are also contain some weirdnesses and some quirks and some surreal stuff too. So yeah, once you're done with the Spider Mastermind, you think like, okay, what else is there in this map? This has been the only area in this map. Like, where am I going next? And it does repopulate this area, so like, okay, I need to go back here. Obviously, there's this other key area. Like, what the hell am I gonna see next? And yeah, there's that nice secret there. And it is kind of disconnected. I don't know. Like, I don't know if you could call this map in a conventional way I don't know if you could call this map good design in the way that you could like the Gauntlet, especially with that nice outdoor area and all those shapes. Some of the Romero maps, you could definitely call those like good design in a traditional sense, where there's a lot of these interconnecting areas, good flow or whatever. Here there's no flow, really, but this was the map that like compelled me the most when I first played this game. Like, this was the map that felt the most memorable to me. Even though like here it's just hallways, like what the hell am I doing here? You know, I fought a Spider Mastermind. What is this? But it kind of like that feeling like of anticipation, like you really have no idea what to expect, is always like the most exciting for me. So even though it is just hallways, it kind of like, I don't know, even though it is like a little more bare bone, it's kind of like you just don't know, like the strangeness of those things juxtaposed with each other makes it work. Like if it were just hallways in some other context, like the context is always important for these areas. And oftentimes in some of these maps, it'll just be random. But I think it makes, the context is what makes crazy stuff work, you know, in the context of a whole map. And I think that like a lot of commentary on game design gets too focused on the way that things interconnect and this sort of idea of elegance, and it doesn't really account for this. By the way, this is introducing the revenants as more of a enemy, which will become a major feature in Doom 2. We obviously saw one earlier, but there's 3 there. They're all right in this like little self-contained area, so you can shoot at them. You know, you got the rocket launcher or the plasma gun. They're pretty easily taken care of, but they have that homing weapon, so that's pretty scary. This is another one of those rooms which I've said are just basically a rectangle, and like this is like the technique of elongating this room is like something that I would have come up with when I was like 12. Just like, I'm gonna make a staircase that you go up and it winds around. You're trying to like milk as much out of the space as possible, but it actually works because it opens up a different part of it gradually, and it's a way of making what is ostensibly like a very simple layout actually work in the context of the game, because it makes it feel like you're sort of unveiling something. Whereas if you just like, you know, had a room that was shaped like this and had all of these things pushed down, sorry about that, minimized, I'll get to it once I kill this guy. If you just had all the parts of this room open from the beginning, and you know you didn't pay as much attention to the lighting, whatever, then it wouldn't be very interesting. And that's why these maps work, in spite of them being pretty simple in terms of shapes and all that kind of stuff. But you can also see the connections between map. I'm going to take forever to try and get this secret, and I don't even really need it, but I just want to get it so that I can get all the secrets. Air control is not a thing in Doom when you're jumping, so it can be challenging. I don't know if like the strafe running is a thing they finally discovered with Doom 2, because in Doom 1 there are some maps that they didn't realize that you can strafe run and just, you know, beat the map much quicker than intended. But they might have realized that by this time. Like, it's possible that they want you to access this area in a different way, like maybe not run at full speed, but like walk. But I have always run on, and in Chocolate Doom you have to exit the game to turn it off again. So that's just gonna be how it is. Yeah, I like this area because it adds a, like, you know, that room was very bare bones, but the secret is much more detailed. It kind of makes you feel like there's a depth hidden beyond what you're seeing, which is always like the kind of stuff that I like. Like this very brutalist area, beyond it is something kind of much more weird and organic and strange beyond this like banal surface. It's like it's communicating ideas through design. yeah, and here all of a sudden we're outside, which like we haven't been at all in this map. We haven't also seen this texture at all, and this is like, it's almost bringing back episode 1 map 3 where you're outside and there's this nukage pit. It uses this green texture with the caution stuff, and also unfortunately reminiscent of episode 1 map 3 is the fact that these pits kill you instantly and not instantly, but it's a death pit. You can't get out of it, either of these pits, which feels unnecessary to me, honestly, especially if you're at like 187% health like I am, but I'm just demonstrating for you that that's an insta-death pit. And there are a few other maps that have this. This is definitely a design trope that is frowned upon now, but it's in Doom 1. I really like this outside area because it's bringing you back to Doom 1 in a way, but it's like recontextualizing it in Doom 2. It's saying that, like, I don't know, there's that familiarity of the first episode, the spaces in the first episode, and even though this isn't exactly like it, it brings you back to that. It's the only thing that I can really think of like that in Doom 2. And then almost immediately we're in this last area, which is this a very self-contained exit area, like the other ones American McGee has, but it's more complex. You pick up this last key, but then a billion guys spawn in. It's almost like the boss it's like a mini boss encounter, I would say, because you're dealing with it all at once, you know, and you might be running around trying to avoid guys. In this case, I have the plasma gun saved up, so I know that this is exactly the time where I should be using it, because it's really the context where they're like, you know, it seems like they want you to use it. That light pattern is really interesting. It looks like a dagger or something. And there's these teleporters that, you know, you might be running away from the enemies, so you might try and step into the teleporter. By the way, this connects back up to the first room, which is a connection that feels very weird, like, because you just went outside and you're in all these kind of different areas. Like, it feels very weird that suddenly you're back there. Even though you haven't gone that much space-wise, it's strange. It reminds me of Doom 1 Episode 2 in the way that it does that. But yeah, here's the central area. It's kind of reminiscent of like a few Sandy Peterson maps with this teleporter thing. But if you teleport into these areas before you've really taken care of these guards, they're going to be up close and they're going to be, you know, kicking your ass. So you think that you can escape from all this, and you just end up being teleported into it, which is a really nice setup. But yeah, that's map 6, and that's really the end of this first chapter of Doom 2. I'm going to sit at this map for a while, but basically, yeah, this sets you up in a way that you would think would be continued in the next maps, but the next map 7 through 11, which is the second half of the first episode, I guess you could say, is completely different. It's completely all over the place. It feels nothing like the first half. There's no American McGee maps. It really just feels completely different. And we'll only get back to an American McGee map in map 14. So yeah, it's weird. It's interesting. I think this first 6 maps do a really good job of ramping up, sort of all talking to each other and commenting on each other, but we're going to throw all of that out of the window on the next video, so stay tuned for that. And I'm also going to let the intro text screen play of the story so that you can see that.